if you, in this area, so this is kind of like your hip, right? So this right here, you can imagine, gets a lot of stress. A lot of your weight sits on that right there, right? Or in your arms, you put weight-bearing things on it, right? And so we talked about like, oh, well, it's good for your skeletal. It's good for your bones to lift weights, right? The thing is you're putting stress on this bone right here, okay? As you put stress on that bone, it's like your muscles. It's going to adapt to the stress that's put on it, right? And so if you do weight-bearing activities, you're putting weight on this bone, and it says, you know what? I need to be harder. I need to become stronger. I need to resist this impacts. I need to be able to resist twisting, all this kind of stuff. And so your bone will actually create stress lines, okay? And as these stress lines form in certain locations, it might get weaker in another location where it's not as much stress, right? Because it says, you know, I need to focus all of my osteoblasts and all of my hardening activities up here, right? So I produce more collagen and more osteoblasts to ossify things up there, right? So ossification is that process of hardening. And so what that does really, the whole purpose of that is just to really, so you don't break hips, you don't break your arms, stuff like that, right? But then what happens is like people get older, they change their stance. Okay, they get a little bit wider or something like that, right? They become a little more waddler. And that happens, and then they fall, they put their leg out in a certain place, and they put it, and now the weight gets buried on the area that's not hardened, and they end up breaking hips more often. Does that make sense? That's kind of what happens with those people. But yeah. So tell me about this PTH thing. What's going on?
So I know it's released when there's low.
Where is it released from, first of all?
Released from the osteoblast? Or is it
No. So you got two options here. A main one is your anterior pituitary gland, or it's going to be the thyroid gland. Okay? And where specifically on that thyroid gland? Okay, so we block this one out. Where specifically on that thyroid gland? What are these things called?
Nodes?
Yeah, they're little nodes or nodules, and they are actually called parathyroid. Okay, those are parathyroid nodules or nodes. And these guys release this thing called parathyroid hormone. Okay? What causes it to be released?
Low calcium.
Low calcium levels, right? So you need calcium to hold together for your heart, right? Your heart needs calcium. Any cell that has any voltage gated channel needs calcium for those thresholds, right? And things like that. And so we know that calcium is very important. So you need to maintain a calcium level, okay? So if your calcium levels in the body begin to drop, it says, hey, I need calcium, I need it pretty fast. So where do you have a lot of calcium stored? Your bones, right? That's what makes up most of your bones, calcium and phosphorus. So it says, I'll release this substance from the parathyroid called PTH. Okay? PTH does what? Goes to the bones and it increases something and inhibits something.
So it inhibits the osteoblast.
Yeah, it stops osteoblasts and it increases osteoclasts. Because what do osteoclasts do?
Break down bone.
Osteoclasts break down bone and do what with the bone?
The calcium that they break down.
They got
put it back in the system.
calcium and phosphorus. Calcium and phosphorus actually get put back into the bloodstream. And when I put them back in the bloodstream, if I put calcium back in there, it's going to do it to my calcium levels. Raise them. So now once they get back into homeostasis or on their normal level, what's going to happen? It stimulates the release of a certain hormone called
IL-6.
calcitonin. What does IL-6 do? So, true. But the way this is working, so right now we're discussing like how hormones regulate bone thing. And so what happens is you release PTH and it responds to low calcium levels. Decrease osteoblast activity, so you stop using your calcium and you start releasing it from osteoclasts, breaking down the bone. When they put the calcium back in the blood, it comes back into homeostasis and another hormone is now released, okay? And it's called calcitonin. This hormone is released and it comes back up here and it says, hey, comes back up to the central nervous system and says, hey, no, my it says, you know, the calcium levels are normal, and I'm going to inhibit PTH. Because you don't want to keep breaking it down, because what happens if you keep breaking it down?
Weak bones.
Yeah, it gets weakened, right? You get like these tiny fragile bones. You don't want that. And so that's something that we try to avoid with that. And so it's kind of just like negative feedback loop right here, right? And so the test, he'll ask you like,
Calcitonin.
what's the calcitonin? Yeah, what's the action of calcitonin? What happens if I didn't have calcitonin? What happens if I didn't have PTH? What happens if I didn't, you know? You go through things like that. But,